Hey guys, my name is George Washington. I know I look like Ramsey Paul, but through the magic of technology, I did some time traveling. And I want to speak to you today about something that happened over Christmas 248 years ago. It was 1776. And a lot of you Americans, you take that for granted that in 1776 we founded this country. Sort of. That's when we proclaimed the Declaration of Independence, but the British had other ideas and it did not look good for us. And the headquarters, we didn't have Washington, D.C. then, it was Philadelphia, and we had what we called the Continental Congress. And they picked me as commander in chief. I was honored. I had the experience because I fought with the British 7 years prior in the French and Indian War. So I had some military experience. And I think it helped because I was from Virginia. And for the longest time, the revolution, a lot of people saw were just some radicals in Massachusetts. For me, being from Virginia, I thought, it probably brought some seriousness to the whole endeavor, that it wasn't just a couple colonies, we were united. So I received command, and it started out okay. We did the siege of Boston, and Howe and the British left Boston. They really didn't have any choice. But then they were headed up to Canada, and I knew they were going to head to New York City. And New York City at the time was full of what we call Tories. Tories were people that were loyal to the king. But it was a major city. It wasn't the largest city in the United States like it is now. Philadelphia at the time was, but it was still a major city, a major port. And I wanted to defend New York City, and Brooklyn. So I brought my troops there, and General Howe and his brother, Admiral Howe, the fleet arrived with thousands of British troops. It was really depressing. And as I watched them assemble, was in July. This is when the Declaration of Independence happened. I was really pessimistic. I guess you guys would call it black pilled. I didn't see a way we could win. And the British landed and they took their time. They were very slow and methodical. Thank God they were slow. They could have defeated our entire army. And I spent most of the time in 1776 just doing a controlled retreat. First, we retreated off Long Island and Brooklyn, which was a separate city than New York City at the time. Then I went up to Manhattan. Howe attacked eventually there. I had to retreat across to New Jersey. And my army was pretty much in shambles. And then Howe, he took his troops and they basically chased us all across New Jersey. Luckily, they were very slow moving. We could move a little bit quicker, but they chased us over the river, the Delaware River, into Pennsylvania. And they would have continued and taken Philadelphia at that point, the capital of our nation, or new nation. But winter came. And in Europe, it was a tradition when winter comes, you kind of pause the campaign. It's time to kind of put a stop to the war. And this is for practical reasons. It's hard to fight in winter back then. And so everyone just had their winter quarters. So Howe, he decided to stop in New Jersey. They got as far as a town called Trenton. And he took his British troops, most of his British troops, back to New York City. They left some Hessians in Trenton to guard that city. Hessians, in case you don't know what they were German mercenaries that the British were using. Very cruel people. Now, the British weren't so bad, but the Hessians were very cruel to our people. So they had the goal of guarding Trenton, New Jersey, which was considered not really a hard thing to do because our army, the colonial army, we were in bad straits. I hate to say it, but most of my troops, they did not have shoes. They were barefoot. We had very little ammunition. We lacked food. It was really a disaster. Again, if Howe was able to move quicker, he would have destroyed our army, and that would have been the end of the revolution. But he didn't. We got across the river, and thankfully he did not pursue the attack. So the Hessians on the other side of the river, They felt pretty comfortable. There's no way we could attack. They were just staying there for the winter, and they were enjoying themselves. It's cold in the winter, and they had a lot of nice buildings there. They had a lot of Tories there, loyalists to the British. They were in pubs, meeting women, drinking. They had pretty good facilities. We were across the river, basically starving and cold, no boots, almost out of ammunition. It was pretty pathetic. It was more pathetic than you guys realize because my army started to disappear. People were just quitting. And I hardly blame them. Well, I do. I don't like deserters. I could never tolerate them. But many did. They just left the army without notice. In the middle of the night, every day we'd wake up, there'd be fewer men there. And they would go back. They'd go back to Virginia. They'd go back to Vermont. They would go back to Massachusetts to tend their farms. And in some ways, I understand because they were extremely cold. A lot of them didn't have boots. And they didn't see the point of being there anymore because they had consistently lost. And I had lost pretty much every battle this year in 1776 from New York City all the way across to New Jersey. I was just trying to keep the army together. And as I said, if Howe pushed the attack, he would have wiped us out. But in defense of Howe thought, well, why should I do that? By the time the winter's over, meaning George Washington, I won't even have an army anymore. Everyone's going to be gone. And it was really looking that way. And when we got to December of 1776, it was really grim because starting January 1st, a third of the army, their enlistments were up. We didn't draft anyone. These were volunteers, and they signed on for a period of time. And a third of them has signed on that they would leave by January 1st. So I was going to lose at least a third of my army, not considering people deserting. That would have been it. It was really hopeless. And again, I was in a really sour or black-pilled mood because the politicians, the Congress in Philadelphia, they were really unhappy with me. They're like, why do we pick this guy to lead the army? All they do is retreat and lose. And there was a lot of politics. I heard it. I tried to put it on my mind, but there was a lot of politics to replace me at that time. It was really grim. So I had to do something. So I devised a plan of trying to do a surprise attack on the Hessians in Trenton, New Jersey on Christmas Day, or at least Christmas night. Not Christmas Eve, but actually the night of Christmas. We would cross the Delaware and try to surprise the Hessians. And the reason we thought we could do this is they weren't prepared. We had spies, rebel spies, that we had information that they weren't taking it very seriously. And they had a tradition on Christmas Day. They would party and drink a lot. And, we thought maybe we could do this. It could be disaster, just totally wiped out. But we felt we had the element of surprise. So on Christmas Day, I had a plan where I divided my army up into 3 prongs. I would be in the middle, about 5 miles north of Trenton. And then Horatio Gates, he was a fine general to the south of me and another general to the north of me. We'd cross Christmas night and get across by midnight. And right before the sun came up, we would attack Trenton when it was still dark. Well, it was a disaster from the get-go. Early in the day, Horatio Gates, my general, I got a note from him from a courier that, he just took off. He went back to Philadelphia. Probably to politic for my job, the asshole. That's what he did. I said, well, the hell with that. We're still going forward. So I promoted someone else in command of his section. And that night, it was horrible. A whole blizzard came in. It was just, you could hardly see in front of your face. The Delaware River was freezing. There was ice everywhere. And a lot of people are saying we just need to call this whole thing off. We just can't really cross in this. But I'm like, no, we got to do it. This is now or never. So we started across, and then I got some more messages from the south, my units from the south, that section, one of the prongs of my attack. They said there's just no way they could cross the river. And the one to the north, they said the same thing. They weren't even going to try. They said it was a suicide. They couldn't get across the river. It's the middle of the night. It's dark. We didn't have any great lights, and we had to keep the lights down so the Hessians couldn't see us. So it was like pitch black. No moonlight, no stars, just furious cold. And again, a lot of my troops, they didn't have shoes. It was miserable conditions. So out of the three prongs I had, two of them just gave up. And I'm like, well, we're going to go. I'm still going to go with my section. And so we did. On Christmas Eve, not Christmas Eve, on Christmas Day that night, when it got dark, we started across. And you probably have seen the famous painting of me crossing the Delaware River. It wasn't like that at all. The boats weren't really sleek. They were flat boats, and they were pushed by rows. It was about 300 yards across. And we were able to get about 18 pieces of artillery across. Knox, if you know Knox, you've heard of Knoxville, Tennessee now. He was a general. He was a great guy at artillery. He was kind of a strange guy because before the war, he was a bookseller. He loved to sell books. But during the war, he was an artillery expert. And he was able to get the artillery on these flatboats, float them over, and I was able to get my section anyway over to the other side. It was horrifying because you couldn't see hardly in front of your face. There's ice everywhere, but we did it. We got to the other side of the river. The bad news is it took us longer than we thought. We didn't get over there by midnight. By the time we got over to the other side of the river, I asked one of my aides, and he said it was about 4 a.m. And I was like, oh shit, we still have a long march to go down to Trenton. We're not going to be able to attack Trenton during the night to get the surprise. But we went on. And morning broke, and it was amazing. Trenton, they had hardly any guards prepared. I don't know if a lot of the Hessians had partied the night before, but they were sleeping it off. And we were able to get our cannon set up. And before the Hessians knew what hit them, we attacked. They were in a panic. We quickly brought our troops in. And it was really a quick battle. You read the Battle of Trenton, but it wasn't much of a battle. Mostly it was them all surrendering. We took 900 Hessians prisoner. And I guess the official tally, they lost about 18 to 20 men, died. And thankfully, we didn't lose any men to battle. We lost, I think, 3 men got lost, and sadly, they froze to death due to hypothermia. And we had 5 people injured, including a young boy. He was 18 years old. He got shot in the shoulder. I knew of him because he was from my state, Virginia. I don't know if you've heard of him. His name was James Monroe. He was 18 years old, a teenager at the time. We thought he may die, but thankfully he recovered, and he later became the 5th president of the United States. But we were able to capture Trenton, and it wasn't a major battle in the sense of it took a long time or a lot of troops or a lot of strategy, but it was so important. I think it was a key battle that saved the day, that saved America, because number one, we were able to get all their supplies. They all surrendered. We got their powder. That's how you fired guns back then, gunpowder. They had boots, they had clothing, they had facilities, they had food. Immediately, the morale of the army went sky high. We were so excited. We finally had a real victory over a European army, like the first time, real one. And so that was huge. So we got supplies and morale went up. And when Philadelphia heard Congress, they were happy with me. They weren't trying to replace me. And then at the end of the year, I pulled all the troops out and I said, we got a great victory here, but I'm just really imploring you guys. I know your enlistment is up, but if you just stay a little bit longer, we can win this. Will you guys just stay a little bit longer? And just a week prior, no one would have done that. But when I said that, there was a pause. Then one person stepped forward and said, yes, I will do this. Then another and another. And then pretty soon, almost the entire army of people that were due to leave the army, they decided to stay on and fight. And the rest was history. We eventually won this war. We had a lot more difficulties, but this was a key battle because the situation looked hopeless. It really was a Christmas miracle because it looked like a hopeless situation, but we were able to make something happen of it that it allows you guys right now in America. You still have the First Amendment and are able to speak freely without the government. You see in England now or Canada, They can't. If they speak and the government doesn't like it, they go to prison. Because you're able to speak freely, in large part is due to the Battle of Trenton on that Christmas night during the blizzard, the horrific conditions, and the bravery of some young teenage boys like James Monroe, who got shot by a musket when he was only 18 years old. So, guys, I hope you have a wonderful Christmas.